Hello everyone, my name is Emily, and today we are officially going to wrap up the story about Miki and I's relationship. As always, if you guys have not seen part 1 or part 2, you will need them for context. I will link them in the description down below, as well as in the little eye in the top right-hand corner of this video. So when I found out that Miki had spent the night with Jason in his car at the festival and never even bothered to call me, I was pretty pissed. I wasn't just pissed because she spent the night with her ex-boyfriend, I was pissed because I was very, very worried and I required one thing of her and she didn't even bother to think about how worried I would be, even though I stressed before she left, I will be dying with worry here. I understand that people get caught up in the moment and they get busy, but she could have just shot me a text and saying like, hi, I'm alive, everything's good, everything's Gucci, but she would not have said that because it was not 2017. If she would have texted me everything is Gucci at that time, I would have taken it literally and thought that she was on shrooms or something.
Whoa, man, like everything is Gucci, like the logo is everywhere.
I had to inject some humor back into this because when I tell these stories, I relive them. Like I feel like I'm there again and I feel myself getting a little heated right now and I have to remind myself that like Miki and I are cool. We've got a pretty neutral relationship. I sent her part 1. At the time I'm recording this, I haven't released part 2, but she loved part 1, so she's looking forward to the rest of them. But after Doug told me that, I was absolutely fuming. I was like, who, what, where, why? And of course Doug was like, dude, like don't make a thing about this. Like remember, Jason's unstable, like just calm down. Just please don't get mad at her. Like she was just drunk and they were both drunk and they didn't want to drive. And I'm just like, well then she could have called me and I could have come picked her up. Jason can find his own way home, but I would have come and picked, like I was just, I was so angry. I was so upset. There were so many things going through my head, but still, even in that moment, I was so angry, but I was like, well, yeah, I guess, like, of course they're not going to drive drunk. They're not stupid. It doesn't even matter either, because in California, if you're drunk in a car, you'll get arrested for a DUI if a cop drives by. It doesn't matter if it's on or not. If you got the keys in your pocket and you're in a car, you'll get arrested for a DUI. Don't ask me how I know that. I feel like that law is particularly ridiculous when you're in parts of California that you will literally freeze to death if you are not in a car, but whatever. I ended up getting off the phone with Doug and I just sat in my car. It was in the on position. I was just staring down the street and just hot fire tears were raining down my face, like involuntarily. I wasn't heaving, I wasn't sobbing. It's just hot tears. Like my inside was just ground up and screaming and my outside was just frozen, just totally deceased. And in that moment, in the height of my emotion, my dumbass decided to text her. And obviously I knew that was going to be the first thing that popped up on her screen when her phone recharged. I wanted her to feel pain. I was angry. The text message was very pointed. I called her a sea urchin at some point. I called her a bitch. I told her I never want to hear from her again, that she's disgusting. Before anybody says, but you were in an open relationship, that was not the kind of open relationship we agreed to. Our open relationship basically meant to us that if Miki or I found somebody that we were very emotionally attached to, that we were allowed to also see that person and engage with that person. It didn't mean that we could have random one-night stands. Like there was still a certain amount of boundaries, at least within the relationship. I just wanted to kind of explain that so you guys understood that and didn't get confused. And mind you, I'm just going to tell the rest of the story and we'll talk about the lessons that we can take from this at the very end. I don't tell you guys these stories from my life to make you think I'm a good person or I'm a bad person. I tell you these stories because there are lessons to be learned and I want to share them with you. I know there are always going to be comments from people who don't really watch the video. They watch a couple minutes and then they go, hey, you're a jerk. Look at all these mistakes you made. And I just want to say, duh, like that's the whole point. I'm sharing these stories so you guys don't have to go through the same shitty experience that I did. But anyway, I sent that text message and then I told myself, I am never going to speak to Miki again. I don't want to hear from her. If she sends me a text, I'm going to delete it. I'm not even going to read it. If she calls me, I'm going to hang up. I'm going to send it to voicemail. I'm going to ignore her. I don't want to hear anything from her. I don't want to hear her side. I don't want to even give her a chance to speak. In relationships before Miki, I was always the one crying and not being able to keep it together, and always the one trying to adjust myself to fit my partner's needs. And I said, I'm not doing it anymore. I don't want to hear from her. I'm going to shut her out. About an hour and a half later, she was calling me, she was texting me, and I didn't read anything. I just deleted everything. I sent everything to voicemail. Doug got in touch with me and is like, hey, Miki's trying to get in touch with you and she can't get in touch with you. She's so upset. And I said, Doug, I'm not going to talk to her. I don't want to hear what she has to say. I'm not interested in anything that she has to say or think or feel. I don't believe any of it. Tell her to fuck off. Doug was like, are you sure you want to end it this way? Like, Doug was kind of a proponent for us breaking up because he knew that we were not compatible, but he was like, dude, like, this is mean. Like, you should at least hear her out and hear what she has to say. And I was just like, nope. I don't care. Eventually, Doug was like, all right, dude, you're being stubborn, whatever. He was irritated with me, but I didn't care. I was so hurt. It's like I just shut down, like a computer just shut down. Nothing, no functions were working. After about 2 days of ignoring her and multiple texts from Doug being like, dude, she is in shambles. She is bawling. She's broken. Like, you have to let her talk to you. I kept being stubborn. I was a jerk. And before I continue on to the next part, I just want to say that she swears up and down that she did not sleep with Jason. She slept in the front of the car. He slept in the back. They did not want to take an expensive taxi back home because in those days, Uber didn't exist. At least I don't think it did. And they obviously couldn't call their parents because then they would be busted for drinking. But she still swears nothing happened, and I am very much inclined to believe her. After several days of trying to get in touch with me, but to no avail because I just kept deleting everything, she ended up showing up at my work as I was finishing my shift, and for total transparency's sake, I did something similar to that. I didn't show up hysterical, and there were much different, weirder circumstances to that. That may be a whole nother sketchbook story time one day, but I just want to be very clear that I had done something similar. In my case, we were pretty young, so I just went up and said, is so-and-so working? And they said no, and that was literally the end of it. But in Miki's case, she was just absolutely beside herself. She was holding this little lobster stuffed animal thing that I had got her when we went to the Santa Cruz Beach Board Walk a couple weeks prior, and it was just like the sight of her absolutely broke my heart because she's tiny and cute and adorable, and you don't ever want to make an adorable, cute human cry, and I still like hate myself for walking past her, and she just followed me and said, please, you need to listen to me, like you need to let me explain. And what was horrible, it's like I know that feeling when you've been misunderstood or you've made a mistake and you're trying to talk to the person and you're trying to apologize, but they're just not hearing it. Like, I knew that feeling of desperation. I still know that feeling. And it just, I don't know how I didn't stop and go like, Emily, you know how this feels. Let her talk. Let her explain herself at the very least. I got in my car, I shut my car door, and she said through the window, and I will never forget this, if you drive off, I will never speak to you again. I will be fucking dead to you. And the only thing I said was, good. And I drove off. And that was it. That was the end. And I was driving down the El Camino just absolutely beside myself, hysterical at that point. I drove about a half a mile and I had to pull over because my vision was so blurred by tears. And at that moment, I realized like this will never work. No matter how much I want her, no matter how much I want to turn around and go back and pick her up and hug her and tell her it's going to be okay and that I loved her, it would never, ever work because we just, in that moment in our lives, we're not compatible. And that realizing that this painful choice not to turn around and go get her was the right one, was what broke me. That was it. That was the end of the relationship. I went home and I unfriended her on Facebook because at that time, that was pretty much the only social media that most people had. I didn't block her. I just unfriended her, and we didn't speak for probably 6 months. One day I received an email from Miki that basically said, I'm sorry how things ended. It's haunted me for months, and I'd really like to get a chance to sit down and talk with you. And of course, I was like, cooled off by then. So I was like, yes, absolutely. I'd love to see you. I'd love to talk to you. I'd like to, kind of do a, as we call a post-mortem on the relationship. So we ended up meeting for coffee and we had a really good time. Turns out after that whole incident, she just couldn't talk to Jason anymore because she kind of blamed Jason for everything. And, I think Jason was manipulative for sure, and I think he was a jerk, and I think he was a little bit homophobic. Definitely, I think he saw two women being together as more of a sexy time thing and not like a normal people kind of thing. I really do think it hurt his pride that Miki wanted to be with a woman and not him, and not so much that Miki wanted to be with a woman, not a man. It's just that Miki preferred to be with a woman instead of him. And I feel like it like kind of emasculated him, or he felt like it emasculated him, which is ridiculous. But regardless of all that, I don't blame Jason. I don't like Jason, but I don't blame him. Like I said before, he just sped up the inevitable. His interference in our relationship just sped up what was going to happen anyway. And, Miki and I discussed that, and she felt like that was a really, really good point. But regardless, she stopped talking to Jason. I think she realized that he was a pretty toxic person anyway. But after having coffee and doing that postmortem on our relationship, everything was fine. We ended up being friends, and we've been in that kind of neutral friendship space ever since. And I'm really, really glad that I had that brief but passionate relationship with Miki. I look back on it fondly, and I'm grateful it didn't work out because we would not have made a very happy married couple, but I'm grateful that it happened, period, because it taught me some lessons. One of the lessons is, of course, to let yourself cool off before you re-engage with someone you have just had a fight with. It took me many years to really truly learn this lesson, which I think is true for everyone. When we are in our teen years, we're a little bit more impulsive when it comes to our emotions. It's hard to hold them back. It's hard to hold our tongue. But after this specific breakup, it really hammered the point home because I felt a lot of guilt from the things I said and the way I handled that breakup. I felt a lot of guilt, and I learned my lesson through the guilt. Not an ideal way to learn a lesson, but there it is. It's a pretty simple lesson. When you are very upset or in a heightened state of emotional being, you are not going to think or process the events properly. So you want to give yourself time to cool down, take a shower, take a walk, paint something, have a cup of tea, just relax, let your mind slow down, let your body slow down, let your heart rate return to normal, and then try to process the events again and think of what you're going to say. Because a lot of the time when you're that upset, it's because you are having a disagreement with someone you deeply care about. So you want to make sure you take care of their feelings as well as your own. And the bigger, more important lesson in all of this is do not compromise on your boundaries for any sort of social relationship. And by boundaries, I don't mean things like simple likes and dislikes. I'm talking about things that make you uncomfortable. I'm going to give a little example with my best friend. Many years ago, she was dating this guy, and my best friend really had an issue with her partner talking about the sexuality of other women or how attractive he found other women. And her partner had no problem talking about how attractive other women are and the sexuality of other women. And it made my best friend very, very uncomfortable. And she would often vent to me about how insecure it made her feel. Now, she realized that a little bit of flirtatiousness is acceptable, but she was still in the process of feeling secure enough in herself in order for him to, be a little flirtatious. So she wasn't quite there yet. And when I talked to her and I was like, hey, did you tell him about this? And she said, I did, but he kind of disregarded it and basically said, that's a you thing. That's something you need to work on. And right then and there, I was like, no, best friend, I don't know if she wants me to say her name, best friend, don't compromise that, because that is something that will hurt you enough that you will build resentment and it will ruin the relationship from within. Now, that's not to say that she should stop working on trying to attain that security in herself and her body. That's saying that if he cannot respect that journey, then he is not worth her time. Being flirty and commenting on the attractiveness of other women is something that guy was comfortable with. So the same way that he can't ask her to all of a sudden feel secure in in herself, she can't ask him to all of a sudden get rid of his flirty nature. And that guy was just flirty by nature. It was part of his personality. Neither party is really at fault here. It's just that they can't really see eye to eye. There is a fundamental incompatibility between them. This guy loved my friend and thought she was absolutely gorgeous, so he really couldn't understand why she couldn't be secure in herself. And that fundamental misunderstanding kind of ended up being their undoing. He continued to cross these boundaries, not realizing how much of a big deal it was to my friend. You want to be with someone who at least has some understanding and respect for your journey. You want to be with or around someone who has opposite traits to yours that complement you and you complement them, kind of a counterbalance, but you don't want to be so opposite that you're disagreeing on the most foundational parts of a relationship. And of course, I'm really talking about any interpersonal relationship where you are really close with someone, where you need to rely on them emotionally in some way. You really shouldn't feel like you need to hide your boundaries in order to keep a certain person in your life. You need to be honest and upfront about what your needs are in that interpersonal relationship, because if you're honest and open, it encourages them to be honest and open about their needs. Respect yourself, respect your boundaries, and respect other people's boundaries. Thank you guys so much for watching, and don't forget to stay out of trouble. See you guys later. This video was brought to you by viewers like you. If you'd like to support the channel, go to www.patreon.com/EmilyArtful. Thanks again for watching.